In June of 2006, a railroad switchman at a Texas rail yard slipped while riding the front of a moving train. In seconds, he was dragged beneath the wheels and crushed at the waist by a rail car weighing more than 20,000 pounds. He didn't die. Instead, his survival is an incredible story of willpower, one where he earned the title Miracle Man due to defying the odds almost every step of the way. I'm AK, and welcome to another episode of Dying is Bizarre, where I dig into the crazy twists that lead to fatal endings or come unbelievably close. If you find stories like this interesting, I'd love it if you stuck around. Now let's get into it. Truman Duncan is someone who came from a family with generations of railroad engineers. Both his father and his grandfather worked on the railroad, so it was natural that as a boy he had the same aspirations for himself. Knowing his career dreams his entire life meant that it was no surprise when he became a railroad switchman at the Gunderson Southwest Rail Yard in Cleburne, Texas. A railroad switchman is typically someone who is operating on train switches, putting rail cars together and taking them apart. They help with train assembly in the rail yard for the most part, but they also do some maintenance as well. It's often a very physical job, tough on the body, and they're expected to keep working in all kinds of weather conditions. Working as a railroad switchman or a train conductor is often considered dangerous. There's constant interaction with heavy machinery, and being run over isn't the only concern. Long-term implications include hearing damage and exposure to toxic chemicals like fuel and asbestos. When the job was first introduced in the 1800s, it was considered one of the most dangerous in the workforce. But over time, the numbers have gotten much better. In 1900, 1 in every 400 railroad employees died on the job. And today, that number is only about 10 employees per year. Truman loved what he did, an expected reality, of course, when you're able to do the job that you've always dreamed of doing. Unfortunately, things weren't so dreamy in the rail yard one day in June of 2006. He was riding the front of a train car, moving towards a repair dock when the unthinkable happened. Truman slipped. He fell, and no matter how hard he tried to recover and outrun it, he wasn't fast enough. "I just fell," he said. "At that point, I started running backwards, obviously as fast as I could, and I tried to outrun it. I didn't make it." The train car weighed upwards of 20,000 pounds, and sadly, Truman was no match for that kind of power. He ended up trapped under the wheels, and by the time it finally stopped, he had been dragged over 75 feet. The way that his body ended up on the tracks meant that he was trapped under the wheels almost exactly in half at the waist, something that should have killed him. Miraculously, he had his phone on him, and he was able to stay alert enough to call 911 himself. I was able to find a partial transcript of his 911 call where he calmly stated what happened. He said, "I need 911, care flight. I think I'm cut in two." The operator asked, "Someone got run over?" And he said, "It was me. I guess I'm going into shock. Hurry up, ma'am, because I'm about to pass out." Luckily, he'd previously had Red Cross training. It's what helped him realize that he was in fact going into shock. Despite the blood loss that he knew he was experiencing, he stated that he felt confident that he could will himself to stay alive. He later reported that he was in severe pain while he laid there, but he knew he couldn't give in and die. He fought to stay awake instead of giving in to the feeling of doom. And after calling the police, he even called his family. Could you imagine getting a call from your dad, preparing for the worst? He made that call thanking his wife and 3 children, telling them he loved them and assuming he would never see them again. The reality of possibly not making it had him so upset that he hung up, put his phone down, and decided to focus on staying alive. Even with his coworkers making numerous calls to try and save his life, it took a rescue team over 40 minutes to get to him. That, plus the time it took them to get him out, meant he was fighting for his life for over an hour. They had to find him, inflate a heavy-duty airbag to lift the train off of him, and then, of course, stop the bleeding to stabilize him long enough to make it into surgery. Eventually, he was able to get loaded onto a life flight. He laid there in excruciating pain for so long that he had to beg for pain medication to keep holding on. His co-workers kept him company during the wait, too. They helped him stay present in an attempt to keep him alive. He was so alert that at one point he asked for water and cigarettes while they waited, which, of course, they supplied him with. I mean, who wouldn't? I'm sure a lot of us wouldn't have the kind of willpower that his survival required, which is why this story ended up on my radar to begin with. I know if it were me, you could probably count me out immediately. Imagining being cut off at the pelvis while a train sits on top of me for an hour is enough nightmare fuel to give me chills. I'd be begging to pass out, actually. Fighting to stay awake is the kind of strength I personally do not possess. It's actually theorized that the weight of the rail car is what kept him alive, which some of you may have heard of before, kind of like how a tourniquet works. Sometimes if you apply enough pressure to a wound, it'll stop massive blood loss and buy you some time. After his rescue and subsequent hospital stay, reporters and talk shows of course wanted to tell his story, but the Duncan family remained silent. He was hospitalized for 4 months, in a coma for 3 weeks, and underwent 20 surgeries. He lost both legs, his pelvis, and a kidney. Only years later did he tell his story, and not for monetary gain or fame of any kind. In fact, after doing a few interviews in 2008, 2 years after the fact, he and his family once again refused publicity. Truman stated that he wanted to tell his story to let others who have experienced traumatic injuries know that life is still worth living. One of my first questions when researching this case was if there was a huge payout after a crazy, life-altering event like this. I wondered if the company had to pay or there was even a court case that resulted from this. Of course, that's the American in me, but just in case anyone was wondering the same, the answer is no. Not only was he not compensated, but he wasn't interested in anything like that. His insurance paid for his house remodel to accommodate his new life in a wheelchair, but that's about it. In fact, he went back to work once he was recovered and took a different position at the same rail yard. As of the latest updates he gave, he happily works there still in an office role. Everyone that knows him states that he is a good guy. Happy, well-adjusted, and grateful to be alive are just a few ways those who met Truman Duncan have described him. He willed himself to stay alive in order to continue raising his children and be there for his family, and that's exactly what he was able to do. As of 2026, coming up on the 20-year anniversary of this, there have been no updates in over a decade, at least none that I could find. The Duncans continue to be a pretty private family, his kids included, which of course is their right. We can only hope that he's just as happy and inspirational as he was in his last interview. And I just wanted to share his story in case anyone out there can relate to something so completely life-changing. Let me know down below if you've heard this story before. I know it was a short one. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you soon.